All right, welcome back, everybody. This is Adventure Co Gaming with Ryan, and I'm joined here with Tom. Say hello, Tom.
How's it going? YouTube?
How's it going, everybody? Yeah, it's coming off the cusp of the ProQuest season, about to go into a new calling, a new tournament this weekend over in Indianapolis. Unfortunately, I won't be going. It's just a little bit of bad timing for me and my schedule. What about you, Tom?
Yeah, also bad timing. Probably be traveling for work shortly, so couldn't make it out there. But we have plenty to talk about leading up to it,
Yeah,
with
yeah.
the ban and restricted.
Yeah, of course. But before we get into this, like I said, we just ended our third ProQuest season, and there was definitely a lot of changes to the meta since the last like professional season that we had. Before this, the only thing we had was like the Christmas season where not much was going on, so it was kind of a refreshing change of pace to see where the actual professional scene was heading or what the meta was looking like. What did you think about it, Tom?
Yeah, so I suppose Falling Worlds, I pretty much had to try Iyslander. I think Hamilton's back-to-back at Nationals and Worlds kind of, as a Wizard player, having not tried his deck yet, that was the first thing on my list to do. But then following, I felt like the meta was wide open. I thought pretty
Yeah,
much any of the tier 1.5, tier 2 decks could show up and win on a good day.
Yeah, it didn't feel like any of them were strictly like out-competed in the meta, or there was no like S tier threat that was so oppressive that it kept some other classes out, like we did in previous metas.
Certainly that's the like surface level observation, right? Is it doesn't seem like there's any gatekeepers.
Yeah, not like Starvo, where only a few decks could even stand up to him, or Prism that completely locked a few other decks out of the game entirely if you went up against it. It didn't feel like there was any of those kind of like one-sided matchups. Now, granted, there's still a lot of matchups that hated going against Ice in general, whether it's Iyslander or Oldhim, but none of them felt completely locked out or like they couldn't win a tournament if there was not enough Ice presence to even warrant going up against them or ruining the record. So overall, a better turnout. Definitely going in the right direction going forward now.
Yeah, I think the data published by LSS really do show us that. I mean, Bolton got a PQ in. Actually, one of our friends, Pedro, ended up there on the list. At least one win for Arachne as well. And maybe this third week of data hasn't come in just yet, but at least over the first 2 weeks, that's some of the results we saw. So, I mean, if you're a fan of the heroes that you like and they're not meta choices, then you still could have done well in the ProQuest. I think that's a sign of a healthy game.
Yeah, there were actually two Arachnes that got confirmed wins before our last report, so that's always interesting to see since it feels like Arachne's incomplete right now, just for the fact that we have new assassin cards coming out as part of a main set rather than as part of a supplemental set coming out soon. So feels like there's going to be more that they can do going forward. That'll be
Yeah,
interesting.
I'm hoping Arachne gets some cards that are not in the direction of fatiguing the opponent. Uh, if it's a full mill strategy, that is interesting, I think. But right now, the deck is just very defensive and kind of attrition-y and not the most fun to play against.
Yeah, you could say it kind of plays towards what you were thinking about the Mike Hamilton list, playing for value, as you said.
Yeah, so turning the discussion to Iyslander, which is the main topic of this recording, we wanted to talk about. Well, first of all, I took it to two pro quests, top eighted both, split the finals of the second one. The gold foil was Bone Vizier. So as a Rhinar player at heart, one of the heroes I started with, I was very happy for that. I brewed a tech right away with it.
I was gonna say
And
I'd be pretty happy with that too, just as a
yeah, yeah,
little trophy on its own. It is the only cold
yeah,
foil
yeah.
version of that card right now.
Which is interesting, right? It's like a lot of the other gold foils, like a Massive Pouncing Lynx, for instance. The cold foil and the gold foil will look so similar. It's really just that border that differs. So yeah, definitely. Like some people had side eye when I revealed it, but I was happy.
I do like how
And I
they went ahead and actually like put them in like the semi-graded like wrappings this time, with like the estimated value, but like they pre-sealed it for you, which is nice.
yeah, I opened it right away though.
I mean, I don't blame you. Like I said, I probably would too. Just I don't have the I for a first, if I were to get my first ProQuest win, I don't think I'd have the heart to sell my first trophy, you know?
Yeah, I'm sort of in the game to acquire bling as I do and just hold on to it. It's I don't need to go positive EV. But okay, Iyslander. She's why we're here.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we can just sort of start out. I want to talk about some of the matchups that Iyslander had in the meta pre-banned and suspended announcement.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, talk about some of the games I had over these two ProQuests. Um, how I felt about that meta in general, some play patterns as well that I sort of discovered. Find every time I play Iyslander, I learn something new about her. So I probably had about 50 matches before the ProQuest of practice, and the rest is what we're here to talk about. So I'm pulling up my logbook here.
The man keeps
I,
his data down pat during
well,
hmm?
yeah, I at least record who I played against and what hero they were on. So first ProQuest was pretty balanced. I think the highest represented heroes were, uh, let's just group all three ice heroes together.
Mm-hmm.
Phi and Dromai at that first one. First round was against Lexi, then Briar, Azalea, who was 2-0 at that point, Phi, Oldhim, Dromai, and then in top 8, which is my loss in that first ProQuest, was an Iyslander mirror. So, I mean, pretty good representation, I would say, across the board.
I
Is
mean,
it like both
if it's
Rangers getting in there?
yeah, I was gonna say if Azalea of all people is getting a few wins at the start of the ProQuests, you could say that it feels like a healthier meta alone just from that.
Yes.
By the way, does
So
that real quick, does that data you include the health totals throughout the game? So you like get
yeah,
the
yeah,
okay. So you have
yep,
an idea of how the game progressed overall.
yeah. So I can just look quickly here. The only game that was truly a blowout was against Briar. It was one of those games where I probably, I mean, it's kind of an important talking point. I probably did a hypothermia type of play twice, uh, and I won the game with 25 life. So that was the first ProQuest. The second one did not have such a diverse meta, or at least what I played against. It it goes Bravo, Dash, Oldhim, Oldhim, Iyslander, 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 Dash, and then split in the finals. And so
Yeah.
so
Definitely
so
definitely a
Dash,
little less
Iyslander, and Guardian.
definitely a little less interesting than the previous meta.
Yeah, which it's only a week, right, between the two.
Mhm.
Uh, they were not on the same weekend, so it was a week between them. And in that short time, yeah, I mean, we saw like the meta converge, I guess, on this perception of the more powerful classes. Didn't play against any Phi though in that second ProQuest, and I feel like it was less represented than the Guardians as well, which is interesting. Maybe we just locally don't have too many, you know, aggro players that aren't on Runeblade still.
Yeah, it could be something like that. There's also the fact that maybe I'm trying to think of it. Maybe it was that maybe it was just a bit of luck that you didn't run into as many of those matchups before. I can't remember if we collected enough, if there was enough data collected on the total turnout for each of those tournaments, but it could be that the week after, maybe some of the pro players who hadn't already gotten one were getting a little more serious or traveling to whatever events they could even get to. You know.
Yeah, it could be. So the first ProQuest I can estimate was around 45 players. That was at the Haven. Uh, Shout out to the Haven. check out their store if you need any singles.
Of course.
Um, and then the second one was, I want to say, well, it was 6 rounds, so it had to be over 32, so probably like 37, 38, something like that. Yeah, so in any case, the meta seemed to converge, and so I want to talk about the deck list and how it's configured to try to play into certain matchups. Uh, and this is where I think Michael Hamilton really just kind of, honestly, I'm still trying to figure out how he came up with such a good deck so early on, because you have to remember, it's like the deck he won Worlds with is maybe 4 cards different from the deck he won US Nationals with. So back in, when was Nationals, Ryan? Do you remember? What month?
Nationals was like that was
Is it September? Is that right?
yeah. I remember that was San Jose. I'm trying to
No, Nationals was in Charlotte.
Nationals is in Charlotte. Oh, that's right,
Yeah.
that's right. Getting my two tournaments mixed up. Yeah, Charlotte, that was yeah, I want to say it was September. That sounds about right. That sounds like in the ballpark area of where it's at.
Right. So as early as September, this like most of the other Icelanders at that tournament were still on full arcane. They hadn't figured out, you know, 12 attack action Icelander yet. And Michael's sideboard plan was there already back then in September. So he like figured it out, I think, almost perfectly. So the list I played at these ProQuests was 1 card different. I wanted a third hypothermia because perception was Dash would be pretty well represented. I think
Well,
that second ProQuest it worked
I
out.
was kind of surprised there was only two hypothermia in his list because I feel like it's such a blowout card against very specific, like at least four specific matchups. You've got Mech
Yes.
that needs to get go again second hand. Briar gets go again second hand using its tokens. Dorinthia gets second hand go again for her sword, and then like Viserai with the Mordred or Mavrian Skies and a few other things. Not so much Fi if they play the sword, um, the Ember Blade, because that's the only thing that gets affected really. But technically, if you go up against ninjas playing Kadachis, then those get hampered too. Plus combo cards if you happen to go up against Saint Katsus. So
Yes. I think hypothermia is in an open field where you don't really know what decks are going to show up. It makes a lot of sense to have 3 hypothermia.
there's enough aggro decks that could
Worlds.
really
There's yeah,
that can really hurt.
exactly. But for Worlds, that meta, I mean, it was what, like, of the 400 players there, 70 something of them were on Fi, if I remember correctly. It might have even been more than that. Which, you know, yeah, he actually is cutting the hypothermia against Fi, which I think makes a lot of sense.
Like I said, it only affects the weapon, so it makes sense to me.
Yeah, yep.
Want to save it
Weapon,
for more of those impactful interruptions if you can.
yeah, yeah. And most Fi players at that level kind of, they figured out already how to play around hypothermia just in case.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, yeah, pretty hard to get blown out once you kind of learn that sequencing, which is not hard.
Nah.
Just end with your weapon. Yeah. Okay. So I brought 3 hypothermia, worked out against Dash pretty well. Won 2 Dash matchups. Both of them were slower Dash players. One of them, in fact, was like not a full fatigue Dash, but full item. You know, like lots of D-reacts. Played, I don't know, at least 6 D-reacts into me. Did all the items. Had Sigil of Solace to extend the game out. And yeah, hypothermia ended his turn when he had 2 cards in hand, like twice. Same with Channel Lake Fritted. It's just, it's kind of silly.
Yeah,
I think,
yeah, especially when you do it on their like let's say they have even a couple hyperdrivers or they have their Teklo core out. You wait until that procs, and then after they try and get the first go again, you use the hypothermia, and they've essentially wasted their item usage for the turn.
yeah, yeah, it's
It's pretty nasty.
you use it to gain tempo Like
Mm-hmm.
just there's no stopping it. There's no interacting with it. Which I think as someone who didn't believe in Iyslander 3 months ago to like having learned the deck and realized how good the attack actions are and what the tempo mindset is, I think having cards like that just take away all agency from your opponent, not just a frostbite, right? It's like something that seriously inhibits their ability to do what they want.
Mm-hmm.
That's like what separates a meaningful Iyslander turn cycle from like a generic one where you get beat up.
Yeah.
And like engineering those turns is what makes the hero fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it
So
definitely comes out to. Oh, I haven't almost forgot Dromai too. It's the same thing when they want to go ahead and start going again with their dragons. It's just like as soon as they try and get the value out of whatever they've played for the turn, you just shut them down immediately.
yeah, yeah, it's once you start counting like how many interactions hypothermia kind of like bodies, uh, yeah, it makes sense that it got banned.
Mm-hmm.
I think Iyslander will kind of struggle to find find opportunities in game states to kind of replicate that situation where she leaves the opponent with some cards in their hand and then makes two of them irrelevant with some disruption. That's going to be harder to do now.
Yeah, but maybe that was the point for why they banned it. It was too absolute and too free. Maybe if hypothermia costed 3 to put out on the field, then it would be fairer because then at least Iyslander has
Maybe.
to give up an additional card to play it.
Yeah, maybe. That's a channel like Frigid kind of is in that ballpark, right? It costs two. You don't always have a good way to spend that third resource. So it's a real cost to play no, channel like Frigid.
Mm-hmm.
You have to set up that window properly. But against the decks it's good against it, it's almost always worth it anyway.
Yeah, of course. And but they also said that just before we fully jump onto the ban list, it kind of goes into why they said they banned Amulet of Ice too. It was too free of a card that was just easy to throw in as part of the deck building process without any like kind of like back and forth give or take with putting it in.
Yeah. So I have a few comments on Amulet. I'm glad you brought it up. The LSS explaining in their article what you just said, it seems like the deck building cost is nothing to put in Amulet.
Mm-hmm.
And there some evidence, or what they use as evidence to support this claim, is that Iyslander would play 3 copies of Amulet of Ice into every hero, including the aggro decks, despite it being a no block.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is a little bit of a straw man. Um, I think Amulet of Ice, it has some deck building nuance to it. It it's sort of like it requires that you know how to utilize varying hand sizes. Zero cost go again means you can play it on your turn. Blue means you can play it from your arsenal on the opponent's turn. So the flexibility means like if you don't build your deck to take advantage of it, I don't think you're gaining a whole lot from its cost curve, generally speaking. I think what the ban does is it makes the matchups where Amulet was really intended for much worse. Like against Guardians, where they're keen to keep like a 12 resource hand or whatever to block out your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to strip all those cards away, and I think Iyslander can easily get fatigued now, and it's like kind of annoying that
I think it was
that
the
allows
more
that to happen.
I feel like it was more the part that you can compared to Insidious Chill, which gets 3 procs on its own. You get to hold it and then use it at the time where it's going for that finishing like turn without your opponent having any recourse against it. Now, Insidious Chill doesn't technically give them recourse either, but if you start doing fusions earlier in the game as you're setting it up, you can't save it for last. So,
Yeah,
you could stack all three amulets of ice and then just pop each one of them on a single fuse, and then suddenly their whole hand is gone before they've even reacted to whatever you're playing.
Stacking the amulets, I do think that's when it starts to feel a bit more oppressive because, like you say, you fuse and then you choose when to do it. You know, the Oldhim opponent activates a Crown of Seeds somewhere in that uh, like layer resolving of your Insidious Chill triggers, and you wait and see how many cards they have left, and then you crack your amulet if needed, strip the
Mm-hmm.
last card or two. Yeah,
Yep.
stuff like that. I mean, look, here's what I'll say. Because the Guardians kind of slanted more aggro to kill the Icelanders before those combo kills became available,
Yeah.
I think, like, realistically, two procs of that Insidious Chill / Amulet effect was all you ended up needing. You could fuse on Icelander's turn, goes to their turn, fuse on their turn. That's all 4 cards.
Yep.
So I think stacking them was really for like a more true combo kill.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the reason that stacking was important is because it means the optimal strategy for the Guardian isn't fatigue. They'll get blown out by this combo if they try to fatigue.
Exactly.
Now Icelander kind of like, you're gonna have to be way more conservative with your Insidious Chill procs. Like I think.
Yeah, it creates a level of urgency, or not urgency, the opposite, kind of like where you have to play at a pace to make sure you're not burning through your resource when it doesn't affect them or hurt them. Um, because sometimes they'll still have a bunch of leftover cards, and you're like, oh, I want to play this card for my arsenal, but all they're doing is swinging hammer, and they have all the cards in hand to just block whatever I'm gonna try to do. So, even with Insidious Chill being on the field, so it's definitely more difficult, but I don't think it makes it so she's completely hampered. Like I said, it takes away some of her more free plays, but I don't think that she's suddenly in a spot where she has unwinnable matchups, but maybe just has a harder time than before, obviously.
Yeah. I definitely agree there. She's not dead by any means, but I think there are knock-on effects to like the argument that Amulet Device is too free. I
Yeah.
think it's it's free in almost every sense of gameplay, right? It doesn't cost you any resources. You can play it pretty much whenever you want, barring some like interactions with what the opponent's doing, if they're an ice hero, etc.
Yeah. And the fact that you get to crack it for free so long as you've just done a fusion during your turn, or not even your turn, sorry, any time that turn.
There's yeah, pretty much everything interacting with the card makes it seem free. But I think as is the case for pretty much every deck in the game, when you put a card in the 80, there are trade-offs. You're giving up something else that could have been there. And I think that's the case with Amulet Device too. Uh, I've had games against, you know, like the fastest decks, right? The Fies, the Briars,
Yeah.
and I end the game with an Amulet Device unused. You don't always need that effect, and also you don't always draw the fuse like to use it near the end of the game. You might have had to block with that card.
Oh yeah. No, I definitely agree. It's not on its own just a broken card inherently. Um, and to be honest, I wouldn't have thought that it was one of the cards they need to target for a ban. Hypothermia I could see because of how just absolutely one-sided it is against specific matchups. But Amulet Device didn't strike me as one of those cards that was problematic. Um, I'm trying to think of what might be more impactful, but all the other cards I could think of, at least off the top of my head, have at least some conditions where it can or can't be useful, or just some matchups even where they're even completely useless by comparison.
Yeah.
But
So
maybe that's why it came down to Amulet Device. But uh, even then, I don't think it's that crazy.
the way that Iyslander, or at least the way I play her, is like you always want to have tempo unless you strategically give it to your opponent. The reason you do this, it's like for the soccer fans or football, as the rest of the world knows it out there, you'll know that if a team passes the ball backwards, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're giving up the attack. It's going to come back forward. They just need to reposition it. I think Iyslander does a lot of that. It's like
Mm-hmm.
posturing during a game. And that managing the tempo is like the thing you need to learn if you're going to be good at it. So these cantrip cards are like placeholders. If you need to take the tempo back, they won't do it for you, but they can stall to the point that you find that thing that takes the tempo. And if you do have the tempo, it is a card that replaces itself and deals 3 damage from your arsenal. So, like it is perfectly functional there too.
Yeah, definitely some of my favorite cards from the deck. Never felt bad to have them.
Right, right. It's interesting. You can almost think of them as like, uh, they bifurcate 2 parts of the deck. On one side of the deck is like your damage. You put stuff like Aether Hill, Ice Bolt, Emeritus Scolding in that group. Then in the middle you have these cantrips, and then on the other side are your most disruptive effects that don't do damage and are negative tempo when you play them, like Insidious Chill. So in Iyslander, tempo means your opponent isn't threatening a lot of damage on a given turn cycle. And the reason they're not threatening damage could be because you've disrupted them. They could have drawn a poor hand. They could have decided to block an attack action
Mm-hmm.
on the Iyslander's turn.
Yeah.
So in these situations, what I've come to enjoy doing is, if it's say like early to mid game, I will look to arsenal card that does the opposite of whatever tempo situation we're in. So let's say, for instance, I want to talk about this in context of the Iyslander mirror, because I think it's like one of the most fascinating matchups in the whole game, but definitely applies to the other ones too.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say I'm playing against an Iyslander, and I've attacked them with Wounded Bull, and their best play there is to block with 2 cards and send Waning Moon at me, something like that. That's their whole hand. What it means is on their turn, they're going to have 0 cards, which means they're not attacking me, which means I'm the player with the tempo. So the type of cards I'll try to arsenal are the cards that are tempo negative. So namely Insidious Chill, any card that doesn't combo well with Waning Moon in the arsenal, or that costs 0 so that I don't need to
Get the extra card out of
anything.
hand. Yeah.
So like Energy Potion, Insidious Chill, these things that if you play them on your turn would take an action point and do literal nothing. These are type of plays I try to make. So if I have the tempo, I'll look to arsenal this anti-tempo card. And it's kind of like a hedge.
Yeah.
So let's say my opponent, they have no meaningful damage that they're threatening me, and I arsenal a card that's positive tempo. Like I put damage in my arsenal. If I put damage there and throw it at them on their turn, sure, they'll take 5, 6, whatever it is. But there's a chance that that hand that I draw, that those 4 fresh cards after arsenaling, say, an Aether Hill, there's a chance that they don't do much aside from throwing that Aether Hill.
Yeah.
They could be all blues. They could be like Brothers in Arms, Meritus Scolding, and then just redundant cards like that.
Mm-hmm.
Arcane, no red attacks, something like that.
Yeah.
So drawing that hand with damage in arsenal will deal the damage then, but on my turn, I'm going to give my opponent all the tempo. I'm gonna throw like 3 arcane at them or whatever, and then a waning moon, and that's terrible. So the hedge that I'm describing is instead of put a resource sink in my arsenal, like an Insidious Chill, or maybe even like a spell that you would want to pitch a card to, and then pitch another card to Waiting Moon. So like a blue Aether Ice Vein even can sort of fill this role of the
Mm-hmm.
tempo negative card because it's using 2 cards to do something. And if I had used those 2 cards to make that play when I when my opponent had the tempo, I'd be giving the tempo to them even more. So it's the opposite here. It's a hedge to try to make sure I can use all of my cards on every turn cycle, basically.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can see where that makes sense.
The reverse is also true. So I think this one is the more obvious play line to consider. So if my opponent has the tempo, I want to arsenal something that takes it away from them. That's like, I mean, that just makes sense. My 5 opponent is attacking my hand every turn, lots of damage. Arsenal Channel Lake Frigid. Pretty obvious, right?
Yeah.
It's yeah, I guess I should have led with that one. It makes framing the reverse situation a bit easier.
Yeah, just a little bit. I think everyone knows the channeling frigid
Yeah,
value just inherently, so kind of
yes,
leads
yeah.
into, or it might make it easier to follow. But you go on. You're doing a good job. So
Yeah, I enjoy talking about this theory.
yeah.
Because when I first picked up Iyslander, I made lots of mistakes about what I put in my arsenal. You see Insidious Chill and you're like, oh my god, it's this majestic. It's like bomb tier in limited. If you draft it like first pick, it's crazy. Yada yada. Uh, but there are a lot of times that if you arsenal it, it just kind of you get blown out.
No, yeah. So I've played Iyslander less successfully than you have during this ProQuest season, and I could definitely tell you even when I first started playing her or trying to get her to work from Uprising, Insidious Chill was something that I almost considered cutting for how poorly timed I kept putting it in my arsenal.
Yeah,
And that's insane considering how much value you get once you set it up. But I almost thought
right.
about cutting it because it was just, it felt so heavy. It was,
So I, yeah, so this is a good opportunity to talk about Winner's Bite, which I think is, you know, if you ask other Iyslander players, that's kind of their first pick to replace Ammo Device. It does a lot of similar things. It costs 0, it has Go Again, it's a blue, so you can play it from your arsenal. And it's a disruptive effect. So what I think is going to happen is if Iyslander is a force in the meta, cards like Winner's Bite will impose a deck building tax on the opponent, like before you even sit down for the game. Um, the reason I say that is against current builds of Iyslander, the aggro deck only ever has to consider one Frostbite, or Blizzard, or Channel Lake Frigid. So their decision tree is like either I'm paying, uh, like I'm losing most of my turn to Channel Lake Frigid or Blizzard, so I'm going to play around those to some extent, or I'm only getting one Frostbite. And the
most
decision
decks
tree
can
where you
handle
only get,
that.
yeah, exactly. Most decks can handle just one Frostbite. But now, if because Belittle's not there to kind of bail you out and give you like -2, it's 3 Go Again for -2 resources because the blue minnowism comes to your hand. Because the aggro decks don't have access to that now, I think there are going to be fail cases for their deck that involve a 2 resource tax for 0 cost from Iyslander that do tip turn cycles heavily in Iyslander's favor. Uh, and I think that's interesting. If anything, it's nice to like kind of force your opponent to think that way, just because you could have this threat of Winner's Bite in your deck.
Yeah, it's almost like an extra Arctic incarceration. It's kind of like a two resource loss on their part for zero cost on you. which
Yeah,
can mean a lot of damage to certain decks, or take away a
yeah.
lot of damage from certain decks. Heck, it takes away pummel options from Guardians usually.
Yeah, actually, one of my one of my favorite things to do against Guardians is they hold a bigger hand than they should and face tank some Wounded Bull damage.
Mm-hmm.
And then you trigger an Insidious Chill or an Amulet or whatever it is and take the card that they were going to use to pummel. Or generally, Frigid actually does that too.
Or just the
They
resources they were going to use,
resource.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, you get like much more flexible channel like Frigid against Guardian, which is cool because you don't
Mm-hmm.
really want to be casting CLF against Guardian.
No, not usually. At least it blocks for 3. At least.
Yeah. So I think what I'm interested to try out is a straight swap. So 3 of that 2 resource tax effect in place of the amulets, or alternatively, you don't try to replace that effect straight up. Instead, you move Frost Texas to the main board to preserve your ratios, so it's still a blue block 3 ice card, which is important. And in exchange for that, you reclaim 3 more sideboard slots. Because typically the Frost Texas are sideboard. So if they move to main, then you get those slots back.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, Frostex has always been like a back and forth. Like it's at least an ice that blocks for 3, which is nice. So it's never like a dead card, I feel like, in Iyslander, but
yeah,
just whether or not you actually get value out of it, even against the matchups where you'd expect to get value, it feels like again, it's like the Insidious Chill sometimes. It feels heavy.
yeah, it is not guaranteed. I mean, that's a perfect example of the tempo negative card. You play this pretty much only when you have full tempo.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you're spending 2 cards to pretty much do nothing, which on balance is worth 6 life or so.
Yeah.
Probably more because you're a wizard. It's like life is more valuable. Um, so the Frost is going to the main is, I think, pretty sketchy, but you know, maybe that sideboard space could be utilized in a way that I'm not seeing just yet. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, we may see some someone come up with some different predictions or different ways to fill in the space this weekend even, considering we've got the calling in Indianapolis coming up. Um,
Yeah,
so what do you think the strong or the more prevalent heroes are going to be? Even just like before talking about what's going to do well, what do you think people are going to bring to the meta this weekend?
right. So I think, well, first of all, it's a calling, so it's an open event. Anyone can enter. Uh, it's in the U.S. in Indianapolis, so it's a pretty accessible location.
Isn't
So
that
I think
close to
we're gonna see.
Texas? Because I know there's a large flesh and blood crowd in Texas.
It is not exactly close to Texas. They are, uh, like Indiana's pretty far north, like it's near the Great Lakes, and Texas is further
Oh,
north.
that's
So,
right. I need to work on my geography.
in any case, there are some people traveling. We have some friends traveling to it, um, and I think certainly given the way the protest went, there will be lots of players who just play their comfort pick. They're gonna play their Drum Eyes, their Viscerais, the Warriors, um, and I think that'll be great. I look forward to watching. I expect the coverage to be excellent and diverse in terms of the hero pool. But
I'm definitely looking forward to that, especially since a lot of people are going to feel more comfortable bringing their aggro picks again. I can definitely expect to see a lot of Fi because players from
yeah,
all different skill levels definitely feel comfortable playing into and piloting Fi to different levels. So I feel like Fi is going to be one of those that we do see a lot of, though.
I agree there. I think lots of Phi, um, and there's also this discourse about Briar now kind of being like her
A top
shackles
pick.
have been taken off with the Iyslander bans here, and not that she had a tough Oldhim matchup, but it was. I mean, he has tools to do well against Briar, so him losing Winter's Well is a big deal. So like if you expect less Oldhim and Iyslander, then Briar does seem pretty good. Seems like she doesn't have too many bad matchups. Um, and I think a lot of the like experienced players, a lot of the pros are gonna probably be on either Fire or Briar. That's my prediction.
Yeah. Briar has always seemed like it's funny that Briar just suddenly stopped winning or stopped getting such a as much turnout as she's so close to living legends because even after like getting rid of like lightning ball and everything, she still has access to the channel builds and like a lot of people just like playing into that, whether or not you want to say it's good. But I think that to the degree that Oldhim existed and Iyslander existed right before, it made playing channel as an option or as like a strategy just like completely inviable to the point where that's where we saw a dip in Briar players for a while. So I definitely think we're gonna get a bigger turnout for Briar this weekend now with the new bans, because those ice heroes basically always had an answer to Channel Mount Heroic, where it seems like Briar kind of like when she sets up for that level of value, she wants to play to where your opponent just can't respond to that level of value when she plays one or two channels in one and then a few attacks back to back. But when you have ice to just remove cards from your hand, give you frost bites that you won't be able to pitch for and all that other stuff, it's too much value removed from your channel turns that from there on out you probably just get fatigued out from those kind of heroes in the end.
Yeah,
So,
I think you're right. Um, like limiting the channel value was the way that Ice Dex overcame it,
hmm
which it kind of begs the question, like if you're not an ice hero, can you limit the channel value at all?
oh no, unless at least the way I played against it, like as Rhinar or other classes beforehand, you basically just had to out aggro them first or hope that you command and conquer on a nasty turn where they have a hard time defending the channel that might be hiding there or something. It was not. I mean, honestly, you also had the luck where maybe they just didn't get the channels out in time before they die or lose a bunch of their aggro cards to play with them. But that was a rare occurrence for an entire game that they would save up for until they would basically play defensively for almost until they got their channels out, or would still
Yeah.
get enough value out of their cards inherently to where you can't just let them go free whether they have channel or not. So,
So I do like a couple of the points that you're saying though, right? You're saying like if you're faster than the Briar before the channel comes out, you can outvalue her. If you can like throw a disruptive effect in the middle of that channel, maybe that's a way. And you know there are a few decks that do that that aren't in the ice elemental category.
just play fog down, it's fine.
I'm not sure. It's not hypothermia by any stretch.
Nah, not unless it's against
But
the
still,
channel specifically.
I'm thinking like Azalea can, totally uninteractively stop a channel.
Oh,
Right?
absolutely.
Dominate red in the ledger. Sorry.
Or that new what is that new one called? The new arrow from Dynasties. The one that says you can only play one non-attack and one attack action. It's not a hard red in the
Yeah.
ledger, but it's similar to a deck that wants to play a whole bunch of one or the other on a single turn.
I
Um,
I do think that arrow needs an aim counter. I think it might be immobilizing shot.
Immobilizing shot, yes, that's it. And yes, it
Yeah.
does need an aim counter, but we're assuming, hopefully, that you're playing. I think Azalea is only really strong now because she has the Sandscour bow to give her the extra value, even off of just a one card hand. She just didn't have that flexibility or safety before.
I agree that it's like a one card hand thing that she has now. What I find interesting, like first of all, I watch way too much Azalea content for someone who hates the ranger problem of like not drawing arrows. And I haven't seen many like good Azalea players actually try the great bow. It's like kind of hand wavy, oh, there's not enough support yet.
Really?
But yeah, yeah.
That's funny. It gives them access to Hemorrhage Bore, which is like their own command and conquer now. That's so
Yeah,
weird.
bonkers card. Deadeye also bonkers.
Oh, Deadeye's so good. +3 and discard effect with a aim counter. Oh,
Okay, so what we're saying then is the Guardians are, or at least Oldhim is on the downtrend.
yeah.
Iyslander is a little bit worse. Fi lost a little, which makes his consistency a bit worse.
I think he
So
only needed that
Azalea
consist. I think.
is rising in the ranks.
Oh yeah, Azalea is definitely seeing a rise in the ranks because she's a kind of disruption that didn't require any of the cards that got banned. So, against an unprepared aggro deck, she can destroy them with the right play. Um, I don't think Fi loses too much consistency because I mean, like I said, I feel like you wanted the Minnowism combo when you wanted more resources against Ice specifically, and we just saw we're going to see a downtrend in Ice players in general. So I think if
Yeah,
they lose that and then just swap them in for more head jab draconic cards, they'll be fine.
yeah,
Let's wrap this up with just talking about now that we've gone into some details about some of the changes like Briar and the ice cards. Let's just talk about like what we'd say is not a tier list because that's kind of cringe. Let's talk about just like our predictions of turnout versus what will perform well this weekend. So we've already said that Fi is definitely going to turn out a lot. I can definitely see an uptick of Briar, a downtick of the Ice Heroes, of course, because they're losing a few of their consistency cards or some of their strongest cards right before the tournament, which is not great. What do you think about like Mechs and Dories and
yeah.
Reinars?
So we haven't talked pretty much at all about Warrior or Mech. Um, I think Dash is still very strong. One of the things about Dash that always gives me a little bit of nervous energy when I sit across from one is you actually don't know what deck they're playing until everything gets revealed.
They
And
are pretty flexible.
she has three variants now, which is like crazy. Maybe more than that if you're a nuanced Dash player. By all means, let us know how many how many variations you can have on her. I think it's kind of like the whole class identity, right? It's yeah, she takes what's available and does something.
That was one of the things that made her one of the top two heroes back in the day before Monarch came out when it was just the Crucible meta. It was her and Dory that were Dash and Dory that were the two meta decks at the time. Dory just because she kind of had some like ridiculous like variation with just her attack reactions, and a lot more go again cards for her sword right after Crucible came out. And then Dash was the one card that could play like a jack of all trades, prepare for anything kind of deck. So
Yeah.
she's definitely still
So
got that potential.
I think Dash will show up in some number, but I would put her as less popular than the decks you already said.
Yeah, probably less
Um,
popular. She's still popular,
Likewise
just
with Dory.
I think both of the Dash and Dory are still just popular based on the heroes themselves. I think there are a lot of fans of those heroes and their aesthetics that will just bring them out as usual or still come out with them just for on that alone, of course.
And and I'll tell you what, if the perception is that we're gonna see fewer Guardians, defense reactions start coming out of sideboards, like no longer in the 80, Dory will mess you up.
Dory might run
Defense
away with a
pride
few
is
games
good.
because of that, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I think Dory honestly is a pretty good pick. If you're happy playing Dory, if that's what feels like home, then it's a pretty good event for her.
So
And I don't think the
probably
calling has ever been better for Dory than right now.
yeah, so probably an uptick in Dash and Dory. Maybe not to the extent where we see as many Fies and Briars, but definitely an uptick compared to their previous numbers.
Don't have too many heroes left. Maybe just Lexi. She hasn't come up at all.
Lexi is the only other one that I would want to talk about. The other heroes I think are just being overshadowed by other characters of their class. Like I said, maybe Azalea makes a play, but I think Lexi out of the two Rangers is going to be the more favored, especially because I mean, losing Amulet kind of sucks, but she doesn't get hurt as much by hypothermia as Iyslander did. So, what do you think of Lexi? Lexi's like one, actually, if you don't mind, Lexi's like one of those super high roll decks that when I played AJ's list once, I was like, what the heck am I doing? My opponent can't do anything, and I'm just like shooting arrows, like what's it called? Like almost like a crossbow machine gun kind of thing. The fire rate I'm doing,
Yeah.
and every time whether or not I even hit, I'm seem to be giving them frostbites anyway.
So Lexi is a deck. Um, think first of all it should be said that Voltaire has similar levels of power to Winter's
Winter's
Wail.
Wail, yeah, I agree.
I'll leave the value puzzle for anyone who's made it this far in the video. Voltaire pretty much turns all of your arrows into surging strikes, but also those arrows block 3, so
And they also have on-hit effects.
and they have on hits. So surging strike plus on hit plus block 3 for every arrow in your deck. That's what Voltaire does.
Yeah.
Oh, and it has another mode for +1 damage. So
yeah,
cool. Weapon's really good.
yeah.
That's the first bit.
Activate it twice per
Second bit
turn too.
is-
Oh my god.
Yeah, it's insane. So you mentioned this play pattern of like sometimes your opponent just doesn't get to play.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Lexi has always had that type of play
Problem.
pattern. It's maybe well, that's okay. I think maybe it is a problem. I think there are Lexi fans around the Fab Twitter space in the community who are like, yet again, Lexi, is losing some power for the sins of other heroes. But I think Lexi is actually not without sin. I think
No.
it is sometimes downright miserable to play against Lexi. You don't do anything for like 4 turns in a row, and you have a chance at doing something if they like draw a ranger hand that doesn't have an arrow in it.
I was gonna say that's the only balance against their insane power is their own tripping up over their own deck. It's almost like not even a counterplay to the amount of value they can get. It's more like you just have to hope that they can't get that value from the hand they just simply draw.
Yep, pretty much.
That's not great.
Yeah, it's not
Not with
the
all
most
the
fun to play
debilitating
against.
not with all the debilitating effects with it. Like Fi draws consistent power hands to like do damage, but he's not giving you frostbites at the same time or making you lose cards from hand that you can't even block with. Like nah, it's
Right.
not like that.
So in that sense, I think Amulet of Ice getting taken away from Alexi is like it's kind of a good thing.
I think it's a
You know,
healthy thing.
it's one less tool that she has to like extend the number of turns that she's locking you out of the game, which is good. But in an aggro mirror like Lexi against a Fi or a Briar, maybe those games only last like 3 or 4 meaningful turns anyway, and the amulet doesn't hurt that too much. Maybe the amulet is the most oppressive in a more mid-range situation, which Lexi kind of forces your opponent into, because if you don't block her, like your turn is over anyway, because she hit you with Chilling Ice Veins and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Chilling Ice Vein? Is that what it's called?
Chilling Ice Vein, yeah, you got it.
Yeah. I think Ice Vein tripped me up because I'm
Aether Ice Vein.
Iyslander player now.
Yeah. No, it's Ice Vein is a good Ice Vein is almost nice, like a nice keyword that just says if it hits, you have to pay or discard, basically.
Yes, that's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Lexi, because she has access to Ice Veins, will be a good meta pick. Yeah. If the meta is aggro dominated, Lexi will. You know what? I'll just say this. I think there will be at least one Lexi in the top 8 at the calling.
Nice strong prediction there. I'd be interested to see it, to be honest, because like I know her power level can be ridiculous, but I also don't think that Rangers get the fair end of the stick in the long run. But wait, what's the phrase for it? They don't usually get a fair shake because of their own deck building or their own like the way they need to build their decks in order to get that kind of power level. So it'd be nice to see if they actually make it up to the top 8 and see where it goes from there. But yeah, so I think we'll definitely see an increase in. Just to wrap up this part of the discussion, I think we'll definitely see a large turnout for Fi and Briar as our aggro decks. Definitely an increase in Mech and Dory compared to like previous iterations while the Ice heroes are running amok. Decrease in Ice heroes, obviously. Decrease in Rhinar, probably, or at least decrease in Rhinar's. I want to say comfort.
Matchups.
Yeah, favorable matchups. And then Lexi, I don't know compared to how she's going to be compared to previous, but I think we'd probably see like an uptick in Lexi, like a small uptick at the very least, more than a downtick. So that's where I'm sitting on my predictions.
All right.
And then one last thing is, what do you think's gonna win, or what do you think has the best chance of winning?
I think by sheer volume of players bringing the deck that Fi has the best chance of winning.
Yeah,
I
that
think
makes
he's
sense. That
still
makes
just
sense.
like far and away the easiest aggro deck. He still has lots of power. So I'm gonna say Fi takes
Pouncing
it.
links is still nasty, you know?
Pouncing Link's is good, but I mean we could go a whole deal about how little kind of made Pouncing Links truly shine, but for another time maybe.
Yeah. But yeah, I would say Fi probably has the highest chances, just again for sheer turnout plus, it's a good deck still. Um,
Hmm.
Probably Briar, and then I'd still suspect we see one or two Ice heroes in top eight. I still feel like they're gonna make it work, or because the aggro matchup is so wide, they still have the general advantage against them, just not as one-sided or as heavily sided to them anymore. So
Right.
that's where I'm leaning. All right,
All right. This
and
has
it
been
this has been
a lot.
a very fun and long discussion. Like I said, it's gonna be fun having to edit it down to the best parts, but a work in progress. I think this is a nice start for us to get comfortable with the kind of regular content we want to make. So yeah, stick around. Go ahead and say goodbye, Tom.
Cheers. If you made it this far, um, I'm still gonna be playing Iyslander, so
Oh yeah,
yeah,
I almost forgot to ask if you were gonna still keep playing Iyslander.
yeah,
I think
yeah.
there's still a lot of value to have from her, so it's gonna be
She's a
it.
lot of fun still.
She's
Yeah.
she's unique in a way that's like wizard, but not necessarily Kano's type of wizard. So I definitely agree there. Um, but this has been Ryan and Tom with Adventure Go Gaming. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.